Hey guys, welcome back. Today's episode is going to be about soil amendments. I had someone earlier this week request that I do a video on, what kind of stuff to actually add to your soil. And so today that's what we're going to be talking about. So I want to go ahead and get started and just kind of put it out there that I grow stuff organically. And I use air quotes specifically because as far as the government, the USDA is concerned, you're not organic unless you go through their certification process. And it is very expensive. And so obviously I haven't done that. And there's a lot of value to that. And, some people, small businesses and stuff may complain about having to go through that credentialing process to, certification to be organic for your food production, whatever. But I'm not selling to the public. This is just for my personal consumption, my family's consumption. But the reason why it's in place is because if you've worked in just about any kind of business or just with people in general, you'll know that there's always somebody looking for, a loophole to exploit. And this kind of sets the path to where that can't happen, right? So that's why I'll air quotes organic. So it's more of a, I guess from my perspective, well, as far as the USDA is concerned, it would be more natural as opposed to organic, because I'm not doing any kind of certification. But anywho, moving on. If you are interested in actually organic production and learn more about what's certified organic, which is important when you're actually looking at fertilizers and pest control substance that you want to use, I'll leave a link below to the OMRI list when that's, I can't remember what that's for, but that's basically a list of approved products from the USDA that have gone through the certification process and they are organic. So I'll leave a link below so you can find these products. Now, so looking at that, one of the things I want to talk about when you're talking about soil amendments for organic natural use, one of the things to understand is the N, P, and K that's going to be on the bag or product, whatever it may be. Like this is the N, P, and K of alfalfa meal. Most products that you're going to get that's going to have alfalfa meal, it'll be similar. It may vary just a smidge from brand to brand, but this is the N, this is the P, and this is the K. And this is the amount of nitrogen. It's always N for nitrogen. P, the middle number, is the amount of phosphorus, and K is the amount of potassium. So you may be asking yourself, well, what's the importance and what's the big deal of the N, P, and K? What does that all mean? Okay, so back to the nutrients, you have your macronutrients, which are your N, P, and K. And then you have what's called your micronutrients, which your plants don't need as much of, therefore that's why they're called micro. Which are like your boron, which broccoli and cabbage in particular, they need a lot of, more so than other vegetables. You have copper, just calcium. Those are your micronutrients. So, most of the products that you're going to find for amending your soil are going to address the N, P, and K. One thing to keep in mind is that when you're talking about organic soil amendments, aka fertilizer, as opposed to commercial grade fertilizer, the blue stuff that you can get, is the blue stuff is water soluble. And that is, when you put that on your plants, it's immediately, just like that, available. The nutrients are available to your plants. And you're going to see a big pop in your plants. But then it just dramatically goes down. Your organic supplements, fertilizers, the numbers aren't as high like the blue stuff, you may see 20, 20, 20 or 10, 10, 10. But your organic supplements, fertilizers, they're going to have a much lower number. But they're consistent. You may see a slight bump, and it kind of raises, in your plant performance, and then it just kind of stays at that level, and then gradually tapers off as those nutrients are depleted by the plant. But it's a lot more consistent. So you don't need, and it's slow release, so you don't need as much. Much higher numbers is what you would when you're using commercial fertilizer. And another thing is that they're not water soluble, which is extremely important when you're looking at nitrogen. Nitrogen is one of the minerals, the big one primarily, that you see a lot of problems with in the news, any kind of environmental news, that from runoff from like pig farms and whatnot, because it is, just by its very nature, it's very mobile in the soil. So if you get a heavy rain and you put out the blue stuff, right, and your plant may not be able to use all of those at that moment, but it's still in the soil. Well, you get a heavy rain and it washes out. I mean, it moves through the soil very quickly. Whereas your material, your organic supplements, it's not water soluble, so they're going to stay in the soil and slowly break down and slowly release that nitrogen. So it's not just washing out your soil. So that's another thing to consider if you use commercial fertilizers, that you're going to have to apply them a lot more frequently, especially if you've got a heavy rain coming, because you may add all this extra nitrogen and it's gone after a monsoon rain that you get in the summertime. Okay, so there are some little nuance differences in when you're talking about water soluble versus insoluble fertilizers, organic. But that's just an oversimplification of it, but that hopefully will give you an idea. So when we're looking at organic supplements, what I'm about to go over rings true for most plants, with the exception of corn, cabbage, somewhat broccoli, and your onions. Those three in particular, especially your corn, have an exceptionally high nitrogen need. Everything else, a moderate organic fertilizer will suffice. But if you're planting corn, if you're planting cabbage, if you're planting onions, it's almost impossible to give them too much nitrogen. Now, I want to try to be very basic with some of this stuff, especially just kind of looking at it from a beginner's level. If you're not careful, you'll end up being almost like a mad scientist. So, generally speaking, unless you have been gardening for years and are used to the different fertilizer needs of different plants, and or you are garden a lot, in so much as the fact that you have a raised bed, and like for instance myself, I garden just about at least 3 seasons, sometimes 4 seasons out of the year. Maybe not in all my beds. There's only a couple that I actually will winter garden in. But because of that, I take a lot out of the soil, so I have to put a lot of supplements back in. For the most average gardener that doesn't garden intensely like I do, 2 to 3 inches of organic manure compost, and even alfalfa pellets. And I'm gonna, I'll pop up a picture here so you can get an idea. You can get organic alfalfa pellets from any farm store, Tractor Supply, your Rural King, any kind of feed and seed store. You'll be able to get that there. You could get alfalfa meal, but it's extremely expensive because it's got the little specifically made for gardeners, and you get a little 7-pound bag, and it's extremely expensive. I bought a 40-pound bag of alfalfa pellets for, I think it was like $12, and it would have cost me 5 or 6 times that amount if I had actually gotten the meal. And all you're going to do is you're going to add, for your average gardener, 2 to 3 inches of compost in the spring or fall, and then add the alfalfa pellets. And again, if you don't remember, this is your typical NP&K of alfalfa. So it's pretty well balanced as far as the nutrient needs, and it actually has a lot of micronutrients in it as well. But that's all you should need. I am going to go over some of the extra supplements, but again, unless you're a seasoned gardener, you don't want to end up in the solution in the situation where you become a mad scientist. And I always advocate to get a soil test done so you know what your soil needs are. One of the big things is going to be your pH as well, and I'll address that here in a moment. Different nutrients are available at the plants depending on the pH level. So anyways, okay, so looking at the NP&K and what it all means, your nitrogen, generally speaking, and this is again an oversimplification, your nitrogen is for the growth of the plant and for leaf production, right? And all plants need leaf production in order to photosynthesize. Your P is your phosphorus, and that's for root development and for blooms. You can't have fruit without blooms. And the K is your potassium, and that's for your plant health. It's going to help. So potassium again is for your plant health, and it's good for disease resistance, for pest resistance, for drought resistance. Me personally, since I've had issues, as if you watched some of my previous videos, with diseases in my tomatoes, and then I also had issues with contaminated compost. I try to add extra potassium back to the soil to really try to help my plants get that extra boost. But that's what all that means is your N is for your leaves and your growth. Your P is for your roots and your blooms. And your K is for your plant health. Plants need all of it. They also need micronutrients. Their needs will vary a little bit. As a general rule, a 3-3-3 or something that's semi-balanced, 3-2-4 or a 3-4-1, that's going to meet most plants' needs. There are exceptions to that rule. If you're growing corn, that has an exceptionally high need for nitrogen. Same thing with cabbage. Your onions, before they actually start bulbing, have a very high need for nitrogen. It's going to be difficult to give them too much, basically, to where you're bordering on burning the plant. But again, if you're a beginner or you're not a experienced gardener, you just be careful. Just go with your compost and your alfalfa meal. You may find that, and that'll do you for the overwhelming majority of your plants. If you're going into corn, you're going to have a lot of land, and you're going to have to look at some serious nutrient supplementation. Okay, so what are these supplements? In addition to your alfalfa meal and compost, there's blood meal, which is a 12-0-0. It's nitrogen, pure nitrogen. Your bone meal is typically 3 nitrogen, 15 phosphorus. And then as far as potassium goes, you can get, I believe online, there's different sources of it, but green sand, I've never used it. I know a lot of people have for their potassium, so I'm not sure the number on it. Personally, I use wood ash. Not a whole lot. For a 8x4 bed, I'm going to use 1 cup. Now, this is extremely important. If you don't know your soil pH, don't use it. Where we live, typically, we have acidic soil. And 1 cup of wood ash per 32 square feet is not going to alter the pH of the soil too much. But wood ash is actually used in making, back in the day, lime. So, but potassium actually came from the word from wood ash, if you will. It used to be called potash potassium. So it's very high in potassium. But if you don't know your soil pH, don't go mess around with it, because generally speaking, as far as your soil pH goes, for most fruits and vegetables, there are a couple exceptions to this, 6.5 is going to be the perfect pH. The big exception that I can think of off the top of my head is blueberries. Blueberries require about a soil pH of 5. Some of your flowering plants, like I believe like azaleas, they require a lower pH. But 6.5 is pretty much perfect for everything. Now, your Irish potatoes, they can take a lower soil pH, I think about 5.5. But for the most part, 6.5 is going to be right on perfect. Okay. So the next one I already discussed, alfalfa meal. Another good source of potassium as just a supplement. And I will do this occasionally because I have a drip irrigation system. And I do liquid fertilizer of blackstrap molasses. I'll inject some of that into my drip line. And I'll also use fish emulsion. Now, as far as potassium goes, if you're going to use blackstrap molasses, this is extremely critical. Make sure it's unsulfured blackstrap molasses. It has a higher potassium level, but the big thing is making sure it's unsulfured. The reason is sulfur is a fungicide. And your soil life has got different fungi, beneficial and bad sometimes, but it's got some good stuff in there. And if you go adding sulfur to your soil, you can kill some of the good guys, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to mess with your soil ecology. You want to help it develop and grow. And actually, unsulfured blackstrap molasses will do that as well, because it's got sugars in there that your beneficial bacteria and microbes will feed on and help them reproduce and develop and make your soil healthy. Another one, let's see, again, I use Black Cow, KOW, manure compost. I always still do the bean test, just to be on the safe side. But the actual NP&K of that one is like 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. Not real high, which is perfect because it's, a steady supply of nutrients. And I do add extra supplements, but again, unless you're heavily gardening and intensely gardening your soil, Black Cow, manure compost, if you will, whatever it may be, and alfalfa meal should take care of most of your needs. And it's really simple and easy. Another one that I like to use that's cheap and easy is fish emulsion. And it typically has an NP&K of 411. Now, I use that primarily on my seedlings after they have their first set of true leaves. just to kind of get them up and going. You want to be careful with anything with a lot of nitrogen. And the reason is, unless you're talking about corn, cabbage, or your onions, anything that actually fruits, you're going to end up having all leafy greens, and you're not going to have very many flowers. So if you give your tomato plant too much nitrogen at the wrong time, you're going to end up with a big old plant, but not very many tomatoes. So again, just err on the side of caution, unless you're experienced and you know how and when to add all these soil amendments. Just keep it simple. Now for the alfalfa, I told you guys, as far as the compost goes anyways, 2 to 3 inches in the spring. And then I would, midway through the season, usually about July, add another inch or so. Same thing goes with your alfalfa pellets. I've already put out my alfalfa pellets because it's going to take a little while for them to break down and to make their nutrients available for my spring plantings. So I put them out, and I put them out at for my garden. And now I grow very intensely, about 5 pounds per 100 square feet. Now, unless your soil is extremely depleted, 1 pound, even 2 pounds, 2 pounds per 100 square feet is more than adequate. But that's what I use, and that's what I recommend for all new gardeners, just to make it simple and easy. It's just composted manure that you have confirmed through your own soil test with a bean that's not contaminated. Manure, compost, and alfalfa meal, or pellets. If you go to the actual mill, you're going to pay a lot more. But alfalfa pellets and composted manure twice a year. Once in the spring when you go to plant, and then mid-season, just sprinkle it around a little bit around the actual plants. And you'll see later on, once it's warmed up and I'm actually able to get into the garden, you should be able to get a better idea. Yeah, hopefully, I think I've covered it all. Yeah, hopefully that clears up a little bit of answer some questions about what soil amendments do I need, what should I use, what do they do, what are they for. If you're a new gardener, or just use composted cow manure and alfalfa meal, don't worry about the rest of the stuff. But the key thing is to get it out now so that it has time to break down before your plants are actually planted. And then you're going to do it again later in the summer. If you're more advanced and you're confident in using some of these other supplements, go for it. One thing, if you do want to kind of help boost your plants, your seedlings, if you grow stuff from seedlings, your fish emulsion is safe. You can't use too much of that. If you decide to get a hold, I do want to make this note, if you do decide to get a hold of blood meal, you better be very careful with what you put it on. There's a thing called nitrogen burn. If you put too much nitrogen on a plant, you will burn the plant. You'll see the tips of the leaves will actually look like they've been singed. So be careful with that. Just stick with the compost and alfalfa meal. And as you get your feet wet and move on, things will become a little bit easier. But there you go. If you guys have any questions, comments, or something that you'd like to see, just comment below and I'll get on it. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. See ya. Bye.